The huge metal doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a loud hiss. Steam poured out from the opening, and 47 different alien species turned to look. The room became very quiet. Everyone knew what was coming through those doors. 2 humans walked in. Captain Jake Murphy stepped first into the chamber. He was tall, with broad shoulders and green eyes that looked around the room without fear. His uniform was dark blue with silver marks that showed his rank. Behind him walked Lieutenant Commander Amy Clark. She was shorter than Jake, but walked with the same calm confidence. Her brown hair was pulled back and her blue eyes seemed to notice everything. The aliens in the room started to whisper. Some moved away from the human section. Others just stared. Jake and Amy had traveled for 3 weeks to get here. Their ship, the UES Liberty, waited in orbit above the Council planet. They came because the Galactic Council had sent them an official message. The message said humans needed to answer for their crimes against galactic law. The chamber was enormous. It looked like a giant bowl turned upside down. Seats went up in circles from the center floor to the high ceiling. Each species had their own section with special air and gravity controls. The Cricks needed cold, dry air for their insect bodies. The Nebulans floated in gas clouds. The crystal beings from Altair Prime needed bright light. At the center of the aisle chamber stood Council Speaker Zethkari. He was 12 feet tall and looked like a walking diamond. Light bounced off his crystal body in rainbow colors. When he spoke, his voice sounded like music, but today it sounded worried. The emergency session will begin, Zethkari announced. His words came out in the common galactic language, but translation devices let everyone understand. We gather today to discuss the human problem. Jake and Amy walked down the steps to the human section. It was a small area with just 2 seats. Most species had larger sections because they had been part of the council for thousands of years. Humans had only been known to the galaxy for 50 years. As they sat down, Jake looked around the room. He saw the slug-like hegemony delegates. Their purple skin was covered in slime, and they moved very slowly. Near them sat the ethereal collective. They looked like glowing ghosts and spoke by making musical sounds. Amy opened her data pad and checked their notes. She had studied every species in the room. She knew their histories, their biology, and their fears. What she did not know was why they were all so afraid of humans. The Cricks delegate started clicking loudly. The sound came from his mouthparts rubbing together. Through his translator, the clicks became words. The Deathworlders should not be here. This is a place for civilized beings. Jake raised an eyebrow. Deathworlders? He had heard that word before, but he never understood what it meant. On Earth, politicians and scientists just called them humans. Order, Zethkari called out. His crystal body flashed bright white. We will follow proper procedures. A hegemony delegate slowly raised one of his forearms. His name was Gorth Vel, and he was one of the most important leaders in their species. Council Speaker, the humans have broken the non-aggression pact. They have taken worlds in the neutral zone. Amy stood up. Her voice was clear and calm. Council Speaker, may I respond to that charge? The chamber became even quieter. Many aliens leaned forward to hear better. Some moved further back in their seats. You may speak, Human Clark. Zethkari said, thank you. The human colonies were built on worlds that had been abandoned. No other species claimed them or lived on them. We checked all galactic records before we started building. Gorth Vel made a wet, bubbling sound that meant he was angry. Those worlds were abandoned because they are death traps. No intelligent species would try to live on them. Jake looked confused. Death traps? You mean Hellscape Prime and the others? Those are some of our most successful colonies. A wave of shocked whispers went through the chamber. The Cricks delegate started clicking so fast his translator could not keep up. 3 different species activated their emergency air filters. Amy pulled up a holographic display showing the 3 worlds humans had colonized. The first one, Hellscape Prime, had active volcanoes everywhere. The second, Volcanic Ridge, was covered in lava flows and had air full of ash. The third, Acid Rain Central, had storms that could melt metal. These worlds provide excellent mining opportunities, Amy explained. The volcanic activity brings rare metals to the surface. The settlers report that the hot springs are very relaxing after a long day of work. A Nebulan delegate, who looked like a cloud of green gas, started spinning very fast. This was how his species showed extreme fear. Relaxing? He asked in a voice that sounded like wind. The surface temperature of those worlds would boil our bodies. Jake shrugged. Well, you have to wear protective gear at first. But after a few months, most people get used to it. The kids love playing in the ash storms. Several aliens made sounds of horror. The ethereal collective started playing what sounded like funeral music. Zethkari raised his arms for quiet. The crystal being was trying to stay calm, but his body was flashing different colors which showed he was stressed. Let me understand this correctly, the council speaker said slowly. Humans are living, working, and raising families on worlds that we classified as completely uninhabitable? Yes, sir, Amy replied. Is there a problem with that? The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Around the chamber, 47 different species looked at the two humans with new understanding. These were not just members of another species. These were creatures who could survive anywhere. They were beings who saw deadly worlds as homes. For the first time in galactic history, every species in the council was thinking the same thought. What kind of monsters had they allowed into their peaceful galaxy? Jake and Amy sat back down, completely unaware that they had just terrified the most powerful beings in known space. They thought this was just a normal diplomatic meeting. They had no idea they were about to change everything. Council Speaker Zethkari tried to restore order to the chamber, but aliens were talking loudly in dozens of languages. Some were leaving their seats. Others were calling for emergency medical teams. The two humans sat quietly, watching the chaos. With confused expressions, silence! Zethkari's crystal body flashed bright red. The sound echoed through the chamber like a bell. Slowly, the aliens returned to their seats, but they kept their distance from the human section. Gorthvel, the hegemony delegate, slithered forward on his belly. His forearms waved in the air as he spoke. Council Speaker, we demand a full investigation. These humans are clearly preparing for galactic conquest. Only a species planning war would colonize Deathworlds. Jake looked at Amy with surprise. Conquest? We just needed more space for farming and mining. The Crix delegate started clicking again. Through his translator, his words came out sharp and fast. Farming? You grow food on worlds that would kill our strongest warriors in seconds? Amy nodded. The volcanic soil is very rich. Our crops grow bigger and faster than they do on Earth. We have wheat fields right next to lava flows. The heat helps the plants grow. A collective gasp went through the chamber. The ethereal collective made a sound like wind through broken glass. It was their way of screaming. What is Earth like? Asked a small, furry delegate from the Fuzzy Union. His name was Piptall, and he looked like a cross between a cat and a hamster. His voice was tiny and scared. Jake smiled, thinking this was a friendly question. Earth is beautiful. We have mountains, oceans, forests, and deserts. The weather changes with the seasons. Sometimes we get big storms, but that just makes life interesting. Tell them about the hurricanes, Amy suggested helpfully. Oh yeah, Jake's eyes lit up. We get these massive storms called hurricanes. The winds can reach over 200 miles per hour. They can flatten entire cities. But we rebuilt New Orleans 4 times, so we are getting pretty good at dealing with them. Piptall fainted. His small body hit the floor with a soft thud. 2 medical robots rolled over to help him. The Nebulan delegate was spinning so fast he was becoming hard to see. 200 miles per hour winds? That would tear our gaseous bodies apart. And earthquakes, Jake continued, not noticing the growing panic. Sometimes the ground shakes so hard that buildings fall down. We had one in California that measured 9.2 on the scale. Lots of property damage, but people just cleaned up and rebuilt stronger buildings. More aliens started backing away. The crystal beings from Altair Prime began to dim their lights, which was how they showed fear. Amy decided to help explain Earth's environment. She activated her datapad and projected images of Earth onto the chamber's main screen. The first image showed a Category 5 hurricane from space. Lightning flashed through the massive spiral of clouds. "This storm has winds of 190 miles per hour," Amy said in a calm, educational tone. "About 12 million humans live in the area it is hitting. Most of them will just stay inside and wait for it to pass." The second image showed an active volcano. Red lava fountains shot hundreds of feet into the air. At the bottom of the image, tiny figures could be seen. They were humans taking pictures. "This is Mount Kilauea in Hawaii," Amy continued. "It has been erupting continuously for over 30 years. Humans built a city nearby because they liked the view. Tourism increased by 400% after the eruption started. Several species activated their emergency breathing systems. Others started praying to their gods." The third image showed the aftermath of a major earthquake. Buildings had collapsed and cracks ran through the streets, but humans were already working to clear the rubble. Some were even smiling and waving at the camera. "This earthquake destroyed most of the city," Amy explained. "The humans rebuilt it in 2 years and made it stronger than before. They said it was good practice for the next one." Gorthvel's purple skin had turned pale gray. "Good practice? You treat disasters as training exercises?" Jake nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. How else do you learn to handle problems? My grandfather always said that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger." The chamber fell completely silent. Every alien in the room was processing what they had just heard. These humans did not just survive disasters, they learned from them. They got stronger. They treated deadly situations as opportunities to improve. Zethkari's crystal body was flashing so many colors he looked like a disco ball. "Human Jake. What is the deadliest place on your world?" Jake thought for a moment. "That's a tough question. Maybe the deep ocean trenches? The pressure down there would crush most submarines. Or maybe the polar regions. Temperatures can drop to -80 degrees and the ice storms can last for weeks." "And humans live in these places?" asked the ethereal collective in harmonious terror. "Sure," Amy replied. "Research stations, fishing communities, mining operations. People choose to live there because they like the challenge. My uncle runs a fishing boat in the Arctic. He says the storms make the job exciting." The fuzzy Union delegate who had just woken up fainted again. "What about your wars?" asked a delegate from the Peaceful Alliance. This species had not fought a war in over 3,000 years. "Surely humans are a peaceful species like the rest of us." Jake and Amy looked at each other. This was getting into uncomfortable territory. "Well," Amy said carefully, "humans have had conflicts in the past. But we have learned from our mistakes. We have not had a major global war in over 80 years. "How major?" Zethkari asked with growing dread. "The last big one involved most of the planet," Jake explained. "About 70 million people died over 6 years. But we learned better ways to solve problems after that. Now we only have small wars." "Small wars?" The crystal being's voice cracked. "Regional conflicts, civil wars, that kind of thing," Amy said. "Nothing involving more than a few countries at once. Much more civilized." The chamber erupted in chaos again. Species were calling for emergency evacuations. Others were demanding immediate military alerts. The hegemony delegate was making wet, panicked sounds. The cricks were clicking so fast their translators were overheating. Through all the noise, Jake turned to Amy and whispered, "I don't think this is going very well." Amy looked around at the terrified aliens and nodded. "Maybe we should have mentioned that we come in peace first." But it was too late. The Galactic Council had learned the truth about humanity. They were not just another species asking to join their peaceful civilization. They were survivors from a world so dangerous that it had forged them into living weapons. They were beings who treated disasters as minor inconveniences and wars as learning experiences. For the first time in galactic history, every species in the Council was united in a single emotion. Absolute terror of the creatures sitting calmly in the human section, completely unaware of the fear they had inspired. The chaos in the chamber was getting worse by the minute. 3 different species had activated emergency protocols. The Cricks were building a defensive barrier out of their own shed shells. The Nebulans had condensed into their smallest possible form and were hiding behind their seats. Even the brave crystal beings from Altair Prime were dimming their lights to avoid attention. Jake stood up slowly, trying not to make any sudden movements. He had finally realized that something was very wrong. "Council Speaker, I think there might be some misunderstanding here." Every eye, sensor, and detection organ in the chamber focused on him. The silence was so complete that the only sound was the humming of the air recycling systems. "We did not come here to threaten anyone," Jake continued. His voice was calm and friendly, but somehow that made it even more terrifying to the aliens. "We just want to understand why we are being treated as criminals." Zethkari's crystal body was flashing yellow, which meant he was trying very hard to think. "Human Jake, do you understand what your species represents to us?" Jake looked confused. "Not really, no." The council speaker took what would have been a deep breath if he had lungs. "Every species in this chamber evolved on worlds we call garden planets. Safe worlds with mild weather, stable geology, and peaceful environments. The most dangerous thing most of us face in our entire lives is a minor storm or a small earthquake." Amy was starting to understand. "And you think Earth is not a garden planet?" "Earth," said Gorthavel in a voice full of horror, "is classified as a Class 12 death world. That is the highest possible rating. It means certain death for any known species except humans." The chamber fell silent again as the weight of this information sank in. Jake scratched his head. "Really? We always thought Earth was pretty nice. Sure, it has its rough spots, but every planet does, right?" "No," squeaked Piptal from the Fuzzy Union, who had woken up again. "My home world has never had a storm stronger than a gentle breeze. Our biggest earthquake registered 0.3 on your scale. We consider that a major disaster. Our planet," added the ethereal collective in their musical voice, "has been geologically stable for 50,000 years. The temperature varies by only 3 degrees between seasons." Jake was beginning to see the problem. "So when we said we live on a world with hurricanes, volcanoes, and earthquakes, you were describing hell," finished Zethkari. Amy decided it was time for a demonstration. She walked to the center of the chamber, moving with the easy grace of someone used to Earth's heavy gravity. What the aliens saw was a predator moving with perfect balance and control. "May I show you something?" Amy asked politely. Several aliens whimpered. Others activated personal defense shields. Amy slowly rolled up her sleeve, revealing her left arm. The skin was marked with dozens of small scars. "This scar is from a rock climbing accident when I was 12. This one is from a skiing crash at 16. This burn mark is from when I was learning to cook and grabbed a hot pan." She pointed to each mark as she spoke. "This cut is from building a treehouse with my father. This scrape is from falling off my bicycle. These small marks are from my cat when I was 10 years old." Jake rolled up his sleeves too, showing arms covered in even more scars. "Military training," he explained simply. "Plus growing up on a farm in Texas. You get hurt, you patch yourself up, you keep going." The aliens stared in fascination and horror. These humans were covered in battle scars, but they spoke about them like they were normal childhood memories. "Your world," Amy continued. "How many of you have ever been seriously injured?" The chamber was silent. Finally, Piptal raised a tiny paw. "I once got a small cut from a sharp leaf. I was hospitalized for a week." "A week?" Jake asked in surprise. "For a cut?" "It was very traumatic," Piptal squeaked. "My whole community brought me gifts and flowers. The doctor said I was very brave." Amy looked around the chamber with new understanding. "How many of you have ever seen a storm?" Only a few aliens raised their appendages. "How many have felt an earthquake?" Even fewer. "How many of you have ever been in a fight?" The chamber was completely still. Jake was starting to realize the true scope of the problem. "So when we talk about hurricanes being exciting and volcanoes being good for tourism, you sound like demons describing pleasant walks through the underworld," Gorthavel said weakly. Amy tried a different approach. "Let me tell you about Human children. Every alien in the chamber leaned back in terror. Human children play games called tag, where they chase each other at high speed. They climb trees that are sometimes 50 feet tall. They ride bicycles down steep hills. They play in water that is over their heads. They build snow forts in freezing weather and have battles with balls of ice. The fuzzy Union delegate was hyperventilating. They train for combat as children? It's not combat training, Jake explained. It's just fun. Kids like to test themselves, see what they can do. It helps them grow stronger and smarter. When I was 8, Amy added, I fell out of a tree and broke my arm. My mother took me to the hospital, they put a cast on it, and I was back playing outside the next day. You broke a bone and continued playing? The ethereal collective's voice went up several octaves. Well, I had to be more careful for a few weeks, Amy said. But broken bones heal. You get stronger where the break was. This was too much for many of the aliens. The concept that injury made you stronger was beyond their understanding. On their worlds, any injury was potentially fatal. The idea of children willingly engaging in dangerous activities for fun was like describing a nightmare. Zethkari was flashing so many colors he looked like he was having a seizure. Human Amy, what do you consider dangerous? Amy thought carefully. Well, really dangerous would be things like swimming with sharks, climbing mountains without safety gear, or going into a war zone without proper equipment. And humans do these things? Asked the Peaceful Alliance delegate. Some do, Jake said. We call them thrill seekers or adrenaline junkies. Most people think they are a little crazy, but we admire their courage. The chamber erupted in panic again. These humans not only survived on a death world, they voluntarily sought out even more dangerous situations for entertainment. They were a species that became stronger through injury and taught their children to embrace danger. As the aliens fled their seats in terror, Jake turned to Amy with a concerned expression. I think we might need to call for backup. Amy nodded grimly. This is definitely not going according to the diplomatic handbook, but neither of them realized that their presence had already changed everything. The Galactic Council would never be the same after learning the truth about humanity. They had met beings who were not just survivors, but creatures who thrived on the very things that would destroy civilized life. The age of galactic peace was about to end, not through war or conquest, but through the simple, terrifying reality of what humans considered normal life. The emergency alarms were ringing throughout the council chamber. Red lights flashed as automated voices announced, threat level maximum in 47 different languages. Half the delegates had already evacuated to their ships. The other half were hiding behind emergency barriers that had dropped from the ceiling. Jake and Amy stood in the center of it all, looking completely bewildered. This is getting ridiculous, Amy said, raising her voice over the alarms. We need to fix this misunderstanding before someone gets hurt. Zethkari, who was still at his position but had activated a personal energy shield, tried to restore order. All delegates, please return to your seats. The humans have requested to clarify their position. Clarify, squeaked Piptal from behind a thick metal wall. They have already told us they live on a hell world and train their children for combat. That is not what we said, Jake called out, his patience finally starting to wear thin. We are trying to explain that humans are not monsters. We are just different. Amy activated her data pad and projected a new image onto the main screen. It showed a human family having a picnic in a park. Children were playing on swings while parents sat on blankets eating sandwiches. It looked peaceful and normal. This is what most human life looks like, Amy explained. Families spending time together, children playing safely, people enjoying simple pleasures. The aliens looked at the image suspiciously. Gorthavel slithered a little closer to his barrier. Where was this image taken? Central Park in New York City, Amy replied. And what is the threat level of this location? Asked the ethereal collective. Amy consulted her datapad. Well, it is in the middle of a city with 8 million people. The air quality is moderate, there is some traffic noise. The occasional street crime, but security cameras and police keep that to a minimum. 8 million predators in one location? The Crix delegate was clicking frantically. That is a military staging area. They are not predators, Jake said, getting frustrated. They are just people trying to live their lives. They work jobs, raise families, and try to be happy. What kind of work? Zethkari asked cautiously. Amy pulled up employment statistics. All kinds. Teachers, doctors, engineers, artists, farmers, mechanics, scientists. About 30% work in offices, 25% in manufacturing, 15% in service industries. Wait, interrupted the Peaceful Alliance delegate. What is manufacturing? Building things, Jake explained. Cars, computers, furniture, tools, that sort of thing. They build their own tools? Piptal peeked over his barrier. Like weapons? Some tools can be used as weapons, Amy admitted. But mostly we build things to make life easier. Hammers to build houses, knives to cut food, vehicles to travel faster. The aliens exchanged worried looks. These humans not only survived on a death world, they also built their own equipment and lived in massive groups. Zethkari decided to ask the question that all of them were thinking. Human Amy, if your species is so peaceful, why do you have such an extensive military? Amy and Jake looked at each other. This was a sensitive topic. Earth has many different nations, Amy said carefully. Sometimes they disagree about things. The military exists to protect our country if someone tries to attack us. Attack you? Gorthavel was confused. Other humans attack you? Sometimes, Jake admitted. Not often anymore, but it has happened in the past. That is why we need to stay prepared. Prepared how? The crystal beings were dimming with fear again. Jake realized he was making things worse, but he could not think of a good way to explain it. Well, we train soldiers to fight if they have to. We build weapons and defense systems. We study tactics and strategy. The chamber fell completely silent. The implications were sinking in. Not only were humans from a death world, not only did they thrive on danger, but they also fought wars against other humans and had become very good at it. How good? Whispered Piptal. Amy decided honesty was the best policy, even if it was terrifying. Very good. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We have learned how to be very effective at warfare. But we do not want to fight anyone here, Jake added quickly. We came to join the galactic community peacefully. We want to trade, share knowledge, and make friends. Friends? The ethereal, collective sounded like they were crying. You want to be friends with beings you could destroy without effort? Amy was starting to understand the real problem. You are not afraid that we will conquer you. You are afraid that we might accidentally hurt you. The silence that followed was answer enough. Zethkari finally spoke, his voice small and scared. Human Amy, you say your world has mild weather and safe children's games, but your mild weather includes storms that would kill us instantly. Your safe games would put our children in the hospital. Your cities, added Gorthavel, contain more individuals than exist in our entire species. Your manufacturing creates tools that we would classify as weapons of mass destruction. Your bodies, said the Crix delegate, are covered in battle, scars that you call childhood memories. Amy looked around the chamber at all the frightened faces. For the first time, she truly understood what they were dealing with. It was not fear of conquest or invasion. It was the deep, primal terror of creatures who had never faced real danger meeting beings for whom danger was daily life. We do not want to hurt anyone, she said softly. We just want to belong. That is the problem, Zethkari replied sadly. Your very existence changes everything. Before today, the galaxy was a safe place where civilized beings could live in peace. Now we know that somewhere out there are creatures who consider our worst nightmares to be normal Tuesday afternoons. Jake sat down heavily in his chair. So what do we do? The chamber was quiet except for the humming of life support systems and the distant sound of ships launching as more delegates evacuated. I do not know, Zethkari admitted. This council has existed for 10,000 years to maintain peace between species, but we have never encountered anyone like you. We do not know how to coexist with beings who are so fundamentally different from us. Amy stood up slowly, making sure not to make any sudden movements. Maybe we should start small. Instead of trying to join the whole galactic community at once, maybe we could work with just one or two species first. Show them that we can be trusted. Who would volunteer for that? Asked the Peaceful Alliance delegate. The chamber was silent. No species wanted to be the first to work closely with the terrifying humans. Finally, Piptal raised a tiny paw from behind his barrier. Maybe we could try a small trade agreement, something simple. Amy smiled, and several aliens flinched at the sight of her teeth. We would like that very much. It was not the dramatic welcome to galactic civilization that humanity had hoped for, but it was a start. The first small step toward proving that Deathworlders could coexist peacefully with the rest of the galaxy, even if the rest of the galaxy needed therapy first. 2 hours later, the emergency alarms had finally stopped. Most of the delegates had returned to their seats, though they kept their personal shields activated and their emergency transportation systems on standby. The chamber looked like a battlefield, hospital, with medical robots attending to aliens suffering from stress-related collapses. Jake and Amy had not moved from their seats. They had learned that any sudden movement caused mass panic, so they sat very still and spoke in quiet, calm voices. Council Speaker Zethkari had spent the break time consulting with emergency psychiatric counselors from 12 different species. His crystal body was still flashing colors, but they were slower now, more controlled. The emergency session will continue, Zethkari announced. We have reached several important conclusions during our recess. The delegates leaned forward carefully, ready to evacuate again if necessary. First, the council speaker continued, we now understand that humans are not intentionally threatening. They are simply the product of an environment so hostile that it created beings capable of surviving anything. Jake nodded. That seems about right. Second, we recognize that despite their terrifying capabilities, humans appear to have genuine, peaceful intentions toward the galactic community. Amy smiled. And only half the delegates flinched this time. Third, and most importantly, we have realized that the galaxy needs what humans can offer. This caused surprised murmurs throughout the chamber. Even Jake and Amy looked confused. Zethkari activated the main display screen. It showed a map of the galaxy with several areas marked in red. These are regions that have been classified as too dangerous for exploration or settlement, worlds with extreme weather, unstable geology, or hazardous atmospheres. We have always avoided them, but those worlds might contain valuable resources, added Gorthavel, who had finally emerged fully from behind his barrier. Rare metals, energy sources, or scientific discoveries that could benefit everyone. The ethereal collective played a hopeful musical note. Humans could explore places where no other species can survive. Amy was beginning to see where this was going. You want us to be your extreme environment specialists? More than that, Zethkari said, his crystal body brightening. We want to offer humans full membership in the Galactic Council, with special status as our emergency response force. Jake looked skeptical. What would that involve? Rescue missions on dangerous worlds, explained the Crix delegate, who had stopped clicking nervously. Disaster relief in areas too hazardous for normal species, research expeditions to Deathworlds, crisis management during galactic emergencies. Piptal emerged completely from his hiding spot. Basically, whenever something is too dangerous for civilized beings to handle, we would ask humans to take care of it. Amy considered this carefully. That actually sounds like something humans would enjoy. We like solving problems and helping people. Plus, Jake added with a grin that made several aliens nervous, it sounds exciting. The word exciting sent a shiver through the chamber. But this time, it was not entirely from fear. The delegates were starting to realize that having Deathworlders on their side might be very useful. There would be conditions, Zethkari said carefully. To help other species feel comfortable, humans would need to follow certain protocols when interacting with galactic citizens. Such as? Amy asked. Warning labels, Piptal suggested. When humans are present, maybe a gentle notification that Deathworlders are in the area. Sensitivity training, added the Peaceful Alliance delegate. learning how to interact with more fragile species without accidentally terrifying them. Cultural exchange programs, said the ethereal collective musically. So both sides can learn about each other slowly and safely. Jake and Amy looked at each other and nodded. It was not the equal partnership they had hoped for, but it was better than being excluded entirely. We accept, Amy said formally. Humanity agrees to serve as the Galactic Council's emergency response force in exchange for full membership and recognition. The chamber erupted in cheers, though they were somewhat muted cheers from species that were still a little afraid. Seth Kari began the formal procedures. Let it be recorded that on this date, humanity has been granted full membership in the Galactic Council. Their designated role shall be crisis management and extreme environment operations. I have one question, Jake said as the celebration continued around them. What exactly do you consider a crisis that would require human intervention? The delegates looked at each other uncertainly. Finally, Gorthavel answered, Well, there was that situation last year where an automated mining platform crashed on a world with 1.2 times standard gravity. We lost the entire rescue fleet because the gravitational stress was too much for our ships. Amy raised an eyebrow. You consider 1.2 Earth gravity to be extreme? It nearly killed our strongest pilots, Piptal squeaked, and there was the volcanic world where we detected rare crystal formations, added Zethkari. The surface temperature was almost 200 degrees, far too hot for any civilized expedition. Jake started laughing, which caused a brief moment of panic until the aliens realized it was a happy sound. You guys are going to love what humans can do. There is one more thing, Amy said, standing up carefully. If we are going to be working together, you should probably know about some of our other capabilities. The chamber fell silent with dread. Humans can hold their breath underwater for several minutes. We can survive without food for weeks, without water for days. We can function with very little sleep. Our bodies can adapt to different atmospheric pressures and gravitational fields. The aliens stared in fascination. We can see in partial darkness, hear across great distances, and our sense of smell can track scents for miles. When we are threatened, our bodies release chemicals that make us stronger, faster, and more resistant to pain. And, Jake added with pride, when humans work together, we can accomplish almost anything. We built cities, traveled to other worlds, and created technology that seemed impossible. The chamber was completely quiet as everyone absorbed this information. Finally, Zethkari spoke. Welcome to the Galactic Council, humans. I have a feeling you are going to change everything. Amy and Jake stood up together, and for the first time the aliens did not flee in terror. Instead, they watched with something approaching awe as the two Deathworlders prepared to leave. One last thing, Jake said as they reached the chamber doors. When you send us on these dangerous missions, just remember that we consider this kind of work fun, so do not be surprised if we volunteer for extra assignments. As the doors closed behind them, the chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then Piptal, the smallest and most timid delegate, spoke what everyone was thinking. I think we just made either the best decision or the worst mistake in galactic history. Zethkari's crystal body flashed a warm golden color. Maybe both, but one thing is certain, the galaxy will never be boring again. Outside the chamber, Jake and Amy walked back to their ship with satisfied expressions. They had come to answer charges of criminal activity, and had left as the newest and most feared members of galactic civilization. That went better than expected, Amy said. Jake grinned. Wait until they find out about human coffee, or roller coasters, or extreme sports. Amy laughed. Maybe we should break them in slowly. Behind them, the Galactic Council was already preparing the first emergency request for their new human specialists. A rescue mission to a world with active volcanoes, toxic atmosphere, and 1.5 times Earth gravity. To the aliens, it was a suicide mission. To humans, it sounded like a fun weekend trip. The age of galactic peace was indeed over, but it had been replaced by something far more interesting. The age of galactic adventure, led by beings who found joy in the impossible and strength in the face of danger. The Deathworlders had arrived and the galaxy would never be the same.